The baby boomer generation, man, like there's a lot of talk about how the boomers, you guys, because a lot of my viewers are from that generation, about how you guys had, the best of it, really. I'm not saying it's true, but the cost of property was a lot cheaper, in previous decades and things like that. But on the flip side, I'm sure that, boomers had their challenges as well. I'm sure it wasn't all rosy, back in those days. Um, but what will happen when that generation, starts to pass on? I mean, will society change in like a huge way? Will we lose a lot of that, get up and go attitude that a lot of baby boomer I don't know why I can't say that a lot of baby boomers have?
They're the generation that shaped America. From building businesses to dominating politics and pop culture, baby boomers have left their mark everywhere. But even the most powerful generation can't outrun time. As age catches up, one question grows louder.
Yep, Father Time is undefeated.
What happens to society when the largest generation in U.S. history fades away? And what will await the rest of us? On today's episode of The Infographic Show, we're looking at what will happen after the baby boomer generation dies off. In 1946, America was full of optimism. The Great Depression was finally behind them, and World War II had jump-started the economy with a massive increase in industrial production. The war had been won, the boys were coming home, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt's sweeping reforms had built a new social safety net, fueling prosperity for millions of Americans. It was no surprise that a lot of people thought it was a great time to have kids. A whole lot of kids. This era of American history saw countless men, maybe veterans, settle into well-paid corporate and sales jobs that allowed them to sustain a family on a single income. This allowed their spouse to stay home and dedicate herself to the kids full-time.
Man, those were the days when you could easily get, a job that could feed the whole family. Like these days, oh, man, for a single income family, that person's got to be making at least in London £150,000. So what's that, about 230,000 US dollars? Yeah, it's a lot harder, I think, now to raise a family on a single income. What do you think?
Many families felt free to have large families in a way they never did before, and this would be called the baby boom, an era of population growth between 1946 and 1964 that saw a massive number of children born. In total, it's believed this generation had at least 73 million members, making it the largest generation in American history. From the very start, they would be front and center to U.S. history. Things moved fast during this era. It seemed like every day was another historic moment. This was the generation whose schools were desegregated in the South, while some of their parents stood outside the gates in protest. Many of them were in their childhood when they saw President Kennedy assassinated live on TV. The older boomers were of age when the Vietnam War draft began, with many following in their parents' footsteps in combat, while others leading up a robust anti-war movement that divided the country. Given this chaotic period, is it any surprise that many of them made a big impact? The baby boomer generation is huge, not just in size but in influence. Many of them had long careers in politics, producing 4 presidents: Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Donald J. Trump. No younger generation has reached the Oval Office yet, with the only break in the boomer streak being Joe Biden.
Why are, politicians, especially presidents, usually so much older? Like, I'm trying to think. I can't think of a president that's been younger than 45 when they took office. Maybe Obama, maybe JFK. That's all I can think of. Like, is it who else?
A member of the silent generation. Additionally, Congress, the Senate, and governor's seats are full of boomers, making up the largest bloc, with many of them serving for decades. But time comes for us all. The oldest baby boomers are about to turn 80 years old. The youngest are entering their senior citizen years soon, coming up on their 60th birthday in 2026. Of course, this doesn't mean what it used to. Elder care and medical intervention have advanced to the point where people are living longer and better. Today, grandma isn't the sweet old lady with a cane knitting. It can be a feisty gray-haired lady who destroys other local grandmas at pickleball. So the boomers have been staying active in politics, business, and other areas, many of them long past retirement age. And not everyone is happy about that. Ask the younger generations and many will say boomers have held power for far too long. Politics remains dominated by them. Most millennial and Gen Z leaders only break through by unseating long-entrenched incumbents in bruising primaries. And many boomers are still working, controlling a large amount of wealth. Those who have been successful in life are likely to live longer and have the resources to keep themselves healthy. And so many of the younger generations wonder when it'll be their time. And it will be coming soon, ready or not. The boomers might be maintaining their dominance far longer than any past generation, but what is coming next is inevitable. The greatest generation, the one that fought in World War II, is largely gone. The youngest are almost 100 years old, and the majority of the under 100,000 who remain will likely be gone in the next few years. There are about 20 million silent generation members left, all above 80 years old. The majority are retired and will be declining heavily in the next decade. And that means the next few decades will see a fast decline for the boomers. The majority of them will leave the workforce, opening up millions of jobs. It's also likely that many will sell their houses, either moving into retirement communities or into assisted living, which might mean many of those houses will be up for sale. For many of the younger generations, that also means a lot of money tied up by the boomers might be shaken loose, especially for those with well-off parents. They might be due for a hefty inheritance in the coming years, assuming they didn't make one too many "okay, boomer" jokes when that was a thing. But the transition might not be as smooth as expected. The process of aging and dying is very different than it used to be. In the past, many people, they just worked until they died, usually earlier than expected. Maybe they had a heart attack while working on the factory floor, maybe they ignored that nagging stomach pain until the stage 4 cancer was discovered. Back then, medical interventions were limited. Many illnesses were death sentences, with doctors often able to do little more than ease the pain. Today, though, advances in medicine mean there are lots more ways to survive. Many ailments that were death sentences in the past are now essentially chronic diseases. A good example is diabetes, which can now be monitored and managed by most people.
Is it true that if you've got diabetes, it can cost up to $700 a month to get your insulin in the States? Is that true? I think I read that in a newspaper article, and I remember thinking, what the hell? Because over here, it's a standard prescription, so you pay, I think, £9.50 for it.
Even cancer, once almost a certain death sentence, can now be managed for years thanks to targeted treatments. And maybe the biggest advance in healthcare has been all of the screenings, ensuring that so many of those ailments are caught early before they do more damage. And that's a good thing, but it can also cause a lot of problems. One of the biggest challenges from the end of the baby boomer generation will come long before they're gone. There's about to be a massive increase in those seeking healthcare and needing assistance for activities of daily living. There's a saying among disability rights activists: disability is one minority group that everyone winds up a part of eventually. For those lucky enough to get to old age, health problems will inevitably increase, and some will get worse and worse over time. And that means a lot of help is going to be needed. There's about to be a massive increase in demand for healthcare services, for in-home health assistance, for staff at senior living centers and nursing homes. The good news is, the overall success of the boomer generation means that they're likely to have a lot of disposable income
To pay for it, yeah. But then a lot of these jobs often don't pay that well. So are there enough people to actually work in these industries?
to put into late-in-life needs. The bad news, at least according to the younger generations, is that most of that money will come out of their inheritance. And for those relying on health insurance, the rising demand is expected to drive premiums higher, leaving younger Americans footing the bill. The increase in healthcare demands is a double-edged sword for those on the outside of the boomer generation. It's going to be a strain on the U.S. healthcare system, and it could result in raised costs for everyone else. However, it's also likely to create a massive increase in job opportunities for younger generations. While this will certainly be a boom time for doctors, it's not exactly an easy job to get. However, there are plenty of jobs in the field that don't require the same level of time and money to get qualified for. Those include nurses, physical therapists, phlebotomists, and personal care assistants. Many of them are well paid, so this is an ironic situation. The boomers came into this world thanks to a time of economic opportunity, and they may create one as they exit it. That is, assuming there are enough people to handle it. The U.S. isn't in the worst shape yet, but its birth rate has been falling for decades.
Yeah, this is happening here as well. I think it's happening all over Europe. Big problem. It's a big problem that not enough people are talking about, because I mean, if there's no people, who pays the taxes? Who runs the society and stuff?
China, Japan, South Korea, and much of Europe are already facing population crises, with too few workers to keep their healthcare systems afloat. America may soon follow, with future generations numbering millions fewer than the boomers, forcing healthcare providers to offer higher pay or training subsidies to keep positions filled. It's gonna be a seismic shift in more ways than one. No generation has ever controlled more money and property than the boomers. That doesn't mean that every boomer is rich, regardless of what memes your cousin posts on Facebook, but it does mean that they, on average, have more resources than the future generations, regardless of class. Even a working-class boomer who got a factory job straight out of the army might own a house and a nest egg that would make their kids and grandkids green with envy. And all of that is likely to be shaken loose in the coming decades. The majority of boomers do plan to leave their money and their property to the next generation, which could be the influx of resources that millennials have been waiting for. Most boomers have millennial kids, although some have younger Gen X or older Gen Z children as well. All of these generations have felt left behind as history marches on, and the coming years could see a huge wave of opportunity for them. Many will inherit houses, giving them the stability they have been seeking. Others will inherit the majority of their parents' pension, potentially enough to start a business or make another huge life change. But there may be some stumbling blocks in the way. For one thing, many of the boomers are likely to spend a good amount of their nest egg in the coming years. This will come in the form of bucket list spending as they enjoy retirement.
Like any people from this generation, the boomers watching this, like you've probably already retired. Like, are you enjoying this period of your life compared to when you were working? Like, are you enjoying it more? Are you enjoying it less? Like, what do you sort of think of what you're hearing?
Taking cruises and vacations, as well as necessary spending for healthcare or assisted living. That means many younger generations may watch in horror as mom and dad burn through the inheritance they were counting on.
But I mean, that's their money at the end of the day. Like, you can do whatever you want with your money. Like, absolutely. You shouldn't, like, expect money from somebody else just because they're your mum or your grandma. They worked for that money. That's the way I see it.
And for the boomers planning to pass down a suburban home, a tempting offer from a big real estate company might change that. Many firms are buying up properties to flip back onto the market at prices most millennials could never hope to afford. If a lot of new houses enter the market, prices will drop, despite what the companies might want. Increased supply means a buyer's market, and those house sales will go into inheritance, which means that a lot of money is still coming to the kids. That could mean a boom in house sales for the younger generation and a whole lot of new homeowners. This will also mean a population change for suburbs in particular, as a younger, more diverse generation moves in and shakes up the PTA meetings. But other systems might be taxed to their limit. The boomers never lived under FDR themselves, but many grew up hearing stories about him from their parents. He created several government systems designed to ease the process of aging and create a safety net, particularly Social Security, which provides a monthly payment for living to senior citizens. There's also Medicare, which is a government-run health insurance service for seniors.
How much does the Social Security payments amount to? Is it enough to actually live on?
That has massively reduced the number of seniors living in poverty. But many worry that there is more money coming out of the system than going in. Both systems are about to get an influx of new members as the remainder of the baby boomers age into them, with millions already having transitioned into their senior years. Over the next 5 years, the entire generation will qualify for senior status, and that will put a big strain on the system's funding. It's likely that the next decade or two will be dominated by the aging of the boomer generation. Given that medical science gets better all the time, it's likely this generation will have more nonagenarians and centenarians than any other, which means that the time it takes them to pass off into history won't be coming anytime soon. But the majority of them will be leaving active roles in society sooner rather than later, and that could mean a huge wave of job openings, especially in one building. Today, over a third of the House of Representatives is composed of baby boomers, 170 members. They're joined by 17 members of the silent generation still holding on, along with 180 Gen Xers, 66 millennials, and just one lonely Gen Z lawmaker. The Senate is even more skewed, 60 boomers, 6 silent generation, 28 Gen X, and only 5 millennials.
Wow, so overwhelmingly over the age of, say, 60.
No wonder so many young Americans feel that Congress doesn't represent their interests. And it also means that there's about to be massive turnover, whether they like it or not. There is no maximum age limit on serving in Congress. Famously, South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond served until he was 100 years old.
100? I mean, come on, man. Like, at that point, just retire. Like 100 years old. I mean, look, at the end of the day, if he can physically do the job, fair enough. But I've never seen anyway.
And died months after leaving office. But the vast majority of representatives take their pension and retire once they approach their 80s. That means a number of seats in the Senate and House are likely to be up for grabs in the coming years. And that could mean a pitched battle for the future of the parties. Many of the established old guard have been training successors, most of them Gen X politicians who are more likely to keep the status quo. But the younger generation wants its say, and they're not being quiet anymore. The recent years have already seen pitched battles for control of the key House and Senate seats, pitting generations against each other. In 2025, 80-year-old liberal representative Jan Schakowsky faced a challenge from 26-year-old progressive influencer Kat Abugazela, who quickly raised millions from her online fanbase. Recognizing the power of the too-old argument, Schakowsky chose to retire. That leaves Abugazela facing off against Daniel Biss, a 48-year-old mayor and Schakowsky ally with a well-established base of institutional support. One way or another, there's going to be a generational shift, but the two visions couldn't be more different. And this is likely to repeat itself across the country. The boomer hold has been one of the few bipartisan things in Washington. Both parties are about to face an influx of young, ambitious, and iconoclastic politicians who have no regard for the old ways.
Honestly, I think we kind of need it because we need new ideas. The way things are, like in society, for the majority of people, it just can't keep on going like this. This just the distribution of wealth is just so bad. Like that's why you're seeing this cost of living crisis. That's why you're seeing property prices continuing to rise because like there's so many laws that are passed that protect institutional wealth, which I'm hoping that with new ideas in Congress and in the Senate, we can actually start to address these problems.
While the parties have long been divided on policy,
Like, how is it legal for companies like BlackRock to buy up thousands and thousands of new homes straight off the lot and then rent them indefinitely? How is that legal? Like,
older politicians on both sides often shared a respect for institutions and maintained cordial cross-party relationships. They have worked together to fend off challenges from the more extreme elements of the party base. But now that might all be changing. Millennial and Gen Z politicians, by contrast, tend to be more radical and far less kind to institutions, often blaming those institutions for getting them into this situation in the first place. They demand bold solutions on the economy, immigration, and climate change. They are far more skeptical of U.S. military intervention abroad and of the military-industrial complex. More worrisome to the party brass, these new political challengers are far more willing to go up against their own party, often basing their primary campaign on slamming their own party's leadership. And as a new generation enters, priorities shift. The majority of these new iconoclastic politicians are millennials and Gen Z, and that might leave those Gen Xers out in the cold. This generation, often seen as forgotten and much more laid back than their neighbors, has never had a president. As the boomers pass on, many will be entering their own senior years and worrying that younger politicians will prioritize their own generation's needs. Policies could shift toward the young, such as making housing more affordable, while the concerns of the elderly risk being pushed into the background. But other shifts will be harder to determine, but maybe even more far-reaching. The boomers built America, for good and for bad. As the largest generation and the one with the most influence in the culture and in the power structure, they didn't just shape the laws, they shaped what we think of America as. They built a country that was based around a few simple principles. You got a job and you worked hard at it. You got married and raised a family. You led an honest, square life that has more than enough. There was a sense of conformity to the American dream that was heavily associated with the age of the baby boomers.
but I think a lot of that isn't really possible now. A lot of people can't get jobs. A, B, if they can get a job, it's not really enough to live on. They have to live in their car. you know 3, they can't have kids because if they can barely afford to like rent somewhere, let alone buy somewhere, they probably can't afford to feed another 2 human beings. So the the contract of society, you know, is kind of broken a little bit.
And that world might simply not exist anymore. Millennials and Gen X have been trying to live up to the world that their parents told them was the ideal, and they're not having a great time. Many of them struggle to find steady employment, instead eking out a living on part-time remote jobs or gig work, and that has led many of them to defer marriage and children or opt out of raising the next generation altogether.
Exactly.
Many of them still live in apartments with a house of their own feeling like a pipe dream, and many of them are sharing it with other young people as roommates rather than a life partner.
Honestly, that's the reality for so many people. So I know so many young people who are in what you would think well-paid jobs, but really and truly, because the cost of living is so high in London, they're renting a room in a house. They're paying like £1,000 a month to rent a room in a house.
How will this shift the culture? We're already seeing its impact on TV and movies. During past generations, the majority of the sitcoms were based around a traditional image of the family and the workplace. Dad went to the office, pushed papers, and went home to the wife and kids, and maybe a wacky neighbor. Today, there are a lot fewer sitcoms, and many of them have a more cynical view on work, family, and friendships. Media reflects the culture, and for many, the culture of the baby boomers feels like a bygone dream, and that will result in nearly every area of life being shaken up. The boomers were the wealthiest generation, and that led to an era of unprecedented consumerism. For a while, the United States was a boomtown for manufacturing, as factory jobs were the hottest ticket for blue-collar work. The work was hard, but it was steady and it delivered a good paycheck. But eventually, the demand for goods outstripped the supply, and many of those jobs went overseas. This has been a big part of why many younger people entering the workforce have struggled. The younger generations grew up in a digital world, and they're much less interested in tangible things. Many make most of their friends online, play games online, and do just about everything on their phone. Even appliances that were in almost every house during the boomers' time are becoming a thing of the past, such as televisions, now replaced by streaming on phones and laptops. That might mean there will be less demand for goods from abroad without the boomers, but those jobs aren't coming back, and that might mean a radical change in just about everything. The boomers have often been proud of pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and working for everything they have. That's led many young people to say we need a new version of how it all began, the New Deal. Proposals for universal basic income and universal health care have gained plenty of popularity among the rising generations.
I think universal basic income is for sure going to happen at some point soon because, yeah, we're losing a lot of jobs to AI already. And I think as AI gets better, you're probably going to see even more job losses, especially in the white collar areas, things like accounting, data analysis, basically anything that you can do primarily from a laptop that doesn't involve a lot of interpersonal relationship, I think will be eventually done by AI. And then what are those people, you know, going to do next? You know, if they can't get a job in that field anymore, there's going to be a lot of people that are unemployed.
And ironically, the kids and grandkids of the baby boomers might wind up building a world that does what the greatest generation did for the boomers, lift them up to a new American golden age. And then, of course, they can argue with their kids and grandkids about their legacy. How did the boomers get to this point?
Super interesting video. And, you know, it's the boomers definitely are, you know, an amazing generation that did a lot of good for society. They've built a lot of these companies, the iconic companies, infrastructure, ways of life, contributed hugely to society for sure. It's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next 10 years because, you know, that generation of politician, for sure, if you see large amounts of them go at the same time, you're going to see quite radical changes in what's being discussed in the Senate, you know, almost overnight. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.